Hey, everybody. Welcome to Pink Shade. You guys, this is a bonus episode. I've got my friend here, Larrison Campbell, podcaster extraordinaire, Mississippi gal.
Hey, Jane. Thanks for having me.
Okay. So, Larrison, last time you were here, you were talking about your podcast, Devil in the Ditch.
Yes.
I was about to say Ding Dong Ditch, but that's something different.
That's a totally different game, but also a really fun game to play as a kid, I will say. So,
and now you have a new podcast that I believe you just completed, right? This week was the last one.
Yes. Well, so this week was supposed to be the last one. It turns out we're going to take a couple more weeks before we drop that final bonus episode, which I'm going to say publicly here on your podcast was solely so that we can take time to build an audience. And I'm going to say off to the side was because we had a permissions issue with a couple of interviews and we're just going to do a different kind of episode. So
got it.
It's going to be a really good bonus though. It is.
Okay.
And I think this whole new reworked version is actually going to be more what the audience wants to hear. So.
Okay. Well, the new podcast is Under the Yazoo Clay. Now it's a great name. And I love a good named podcast. And it's multi-layered literally because we're talking about like the Yazoo Clay is a character because if you're from Mississippi, all I heard my whole life was about like when you're driving in Jackson, especially, and the roads are so terrible and it's the Yazoo Clay. And I'm like, I think it's the highway department, but no, it's the Yazoo Clay. No. It shifts so much that you can't ever keep it's just like, you have to have four-wheel tires and driving to Jackson.
It is
so bumpy.
The damnedest soil. And I say this as a former homeowner in Jackson, Mississippi. I don't think there's anybody who lives in Hinds County who has not had to have their foundation redone multiple times. It is a constant battle of like getting somebody out there, getting them to like add, put whatever they need to do to boost your foundation a little bit more.
Yeah.
Crack sealed all the time. And so I went down there with a producing partner last April to start reporting on this. And the first thing, we're having a casual conversation. We're at this museum, this big museum opening. And the first thing they say, we ask them how the dig is going. They're doing this huge project, multi-year project to recover these unmarked graves that have been found near where the old state lunatic asylum, as it was called back in the day, used to sit. And the first thing they say is, do you know about the Yazoo Clay? Because it's the worst damn soil ever. And I was like, well, as a matter of fact, I do, but I don't know about it from this angle. And it turns out it has been a huge problem for the people who are doing this work to look into these graves and try to understand who was buried there because the soil is actually eating the remains.
It's crazy.
And they say, like, I've never seen dirt that can eat metal, but this dirt eats metal. It is the wildest soil ever.
It's so crazy. And it's explained at the beginning of the episode, like why it is that way from the minerals and then how it comes to be. And it reminded me a lot. I don't know if you've watched Yellow Jackets, but it reminds me a lot in Yellow Jackets. There's like that running river that's all red. And you're like, what does that mean? It's like some mineral that's coming down that's, in the theory world of Yellow Jackets, it's putting out some sort of magnetic field so that planes go down. And it's not so much in Mississippi, but the podcast, the premise is, and I remember when this happened, at the University of Mississippi Medical Center, which is, a fantastic, institution. My brother-in-law graduated from there. All the many, many great doctors go there. And it's the cornerstone of, medical institutions in Mississippi. They're building on this section of it. And they go to start building on this new section and they find pieces and parts and bodies. Come to find out, when they used to have the psychiatric institution there, they buried the people there. And either the graves aren't marked very well or over time it has just eroded so much. What did they say? They think it's like 7,000 people were buried there. Is that the number?
7,000 graves. That's what they think. And I think over the asylum's, 85-year history, there were a total of, I think, 30,000 people who walked through the doors there. And so when you think about that, a quarter of the people who went into the asylum ended up buried there. So then it kind of becomes this sort of Pandora's box, so to speak, of, okay, well, when we look at this, like, what exactly are we going to find? What happened to the people inside that institution that so many people died?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
as we looked into it, and this is one of the things I really like about this show, is that you kind of go into it expecting that you're going to be opening the doors to some gothic house of horrors.
Yes.
Like people chained to radiators.
Yes.
And I don't know, crumbling ceilings. And there is an element. There certainly are crumbling ceilings. Thank you to the Yazoo clay and the bad foundation.
Yeah.
But it's actually like really complex. And yes, like they didn't understand psychiatric medicine 150 years ago. So
Right.
yes, people were to a degree mistreated, but they also were really trying to do the right thing in certain cases. In certain cases, I should say, but it becomes this like really kind of beautiful, complex problem that as a Mississippian just so reminds me of the state that we come from, which is full of these sort of good intentions being waylaid by bad intentions with like a nice, little like fusion of like really bad racism coming in to like derail all the plans. And it winds up sort of being a microcosm of many of the problems that Mississippi itself has.
Yeah. The podcast sort of takes you on this journey, and you meet lots of people who say, I knew about my grandmother, but I never knew what happened to her. And you think these people died and they were never like alerted that their loved one had died there. It's sort of like they put them away and either weren't told or didn't think about it. And which is very interesting that I looked up while I was listening. You were talking about a certain disease people had called pellagra, which was a disease people had, but then it made it seem like they were crazy, but really it could have been cured with like an antibiotic.
It could have been cured with a vitamin. Isn't that wild?
A vitamin, yes, like with niacin, yes.
Yeah, niacin. And that's actually where enriched foods come from, which is a cool little side note for all of this. But that is the thing, like that is kind of the era of, quote, medicine that this institution existed in, which is that like one of the biggest causes of mental illness and later death at that time was just that people weren't getting enough vitamin B.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy.
And it affected everybody. And they, because you can't talk about Mississippi in that era and not address the racism, of course, and nobody wants to. And it's really hard to talk about, but it certainly was there. And I loved how you came at it from that angle as well, because Dorothea Dix is a figure in it that was so for these psychiatric institutions and so like, I'm going to get in there as a nurse and explain why it's important. And then you're like, but it's wonderful that she did all that for these people that were suffering, but she was a terrible racist. So that's a problem. It's like, oh, dang it. Can't we just have one thing?
They don't tell you that when they're putting her on a postage stamp. But Dorothea Dix turns out was a huge racist, which is how she was able to come down to a place like Mississippi, because she's from Boston, And normally in the pre-Civil War era, people from Mississippi did not want to listen to women from Boston. But she came down and she said, hey, look, what's really terrible about the treatment of your mentally ill Mississippians is that they're being treated worse than you're treating Black people. And they said, oh, Lord, okay, well, we have to find a nice facility for them. Yeah. And so it actually began as a whites only institution. And then after the Civil War, they sort of begrudgingly, and, the Reconstruction and later Jim Crow era, begrudgingly allowed Black people to come into separate and very much unequal facilities.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that when you're telling a story like this, which is so interesting about, it starts off kind of macabre with the buried bodies. And when you really get into it and you have to champion somebody like Dorothea Dix, who wanted to help people with mental illness, but then you also have to face the truth of that era and what happened, and people weren't really necessarily treated equally. And I'm fascinated by the fact that that place existed and then it moved to Whitfield. When the first time you said Whitfield, I was to myself like, okay, I wonder if she's going to get into it. And yes, you did. Your whole life you were told, if you're bad, you're going to Whitfield. Or she's so crazy, she ended up in Whitfield. Or so-and-so's crazy, like Cooter Brown, they ended up in Whitfield. And Whitfield was always a threat in your life. if you do something bad, you're going to be crazy and end up in Whitfield. Oh, you're going to go to Whitfield or you're going to go to Parchman. One of the two.
Yep. Whitfield or
Parchman's the penitentiary. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So
I feel like girls got threatened with Whitfield more and boys got threatened more with Parchman. Like,
yeah. But I loved that you touched on that, and so many different people of so many different age ranges saying their whole life they got threatened with going to Whitfield.
And that's the thing. And that's what I think is so interesting about this is that, we all existed in a post, lunatic asylum, Mississippi, but there was still another version of it. And that version, the only thing we knew about it was that it was the worst thing that could happen to you.
Right. Crazy people are there. And it is what you're describing, like people chained to the walls and the crumbling ceilings and then not feeding them. And it's like a Nurse Ratched. And you're thinking of the worst thing that's going to happen to me if I don't like pull it together or like don't go out drinking with my friends when I'm 16. I'm going to go to Whitfield or Parchman.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you have two boyfriends at once. You're going to Whitfield. Yeah.
You're definitely crazy. Two boyfriends at once. That is so funny. I tell you, I loved that. It just the humor of it, because it is such a serious subject, but you got to put in that humorous part. And of course, I, as a lived in Jackson my whole life, I did not realize that there was ever anything before Whitfield. And the fact that it's called the lunatic asylum is so wild.
Oh, that was the politically correct term of the era. Yeah, it was real nice to refer to the people who needed to go there as lunatics. It was
like, I got to go check grandma into the lunatic asylum.
Right. And you do wonder why, none of these families ever knew that their relatives ended up there. I mean, when you have that kind of branding, who's going to be talking about that in the family? Who's going to be telling those stories?
And I loved the written ledgers that were found that told from the nurse's standpoint how they were taking care of the patients.
I mean, as a woman in my mid 40s, it is quite chilling to look down there and see the number of women who were institutionalized for menopause.
Right.
Like, oh, there, but for the grace of God and a century go I.
That's crazy because, I could think back growing up and, my parents are in their 80s. And I could think back growing up and my mother, I'm sure probably was going through menopause and she's hot and all this. And I'm 100% sure my dad said to her many times, if you don't quit that, we're going to send you to Whitfield. You're acting crazy. Yes. Yeah.
And little did they know that was actually an actionable threat. Yeah. She wouldn't have been the first.
She wouldn't have been the first to be put in Whitfield because she was having hot flashes and just a little moody. Wow. I loved the story too, Larrison, that it really got my heart because it was, you were talking to one of the, and I don't know the correct term, the woman that was archaeologist.
Oh, the bioarchaeologist. Yes. Dr. Mack.
Yeah, so she was pulling things out and she was explaining to you these things that they had found. It was a filling or it was a lot of rings. And I thought a good point was when you think about the people that were burying them, they were doing it with care. They weren't necessarily stealing things from the people. I liked that. And then she told that story and you caught it because she showed this certain ring. And then you said, well, wait a minute. I noticed that you have that same phrase on a tattoo on your foot. Now, I'm imagining the way you described her is sort of like a thin, wiry, gray-haired 70-something-year-old lady that got her foot tattooed. I was like, and it was from that ring because it meant something for her husband. Tell me about that because that was like a really touching.
Off of that age, but then, yeah. But she, I think anybody who spends their career sort of immersed in death and bones and, sort of the relics of death, probably has a pronounced macabre streak. And Dr. Mack has that. Like, she's cool. Like, I would love to go out for drinks with Dr. Mack. She would be a blast. She's a good storyteller. She really thinks through the stuff that she's doing. And she's the one who's leading this dig, this attempt to sort of unearth these graves, study them, and then help relocate them so that the university can put up, a building on that same site. And it was a really beautiful story. So I noticed that, we're going through this and she pulls out this ring and she points it out because it is a valuable ring. It's, I believe this one was silver, and engraved on the inside of it, it said, "Ever true to thee." And her point was, it's so nice to see this because there is this sort of myth or at least reputation that these places had, that the people who worked there would have taken advantage of the patients. And if they had something valuable, they would have stolen it. And clearly they didn't, because this person was buried with us.
And that person was a real person who had a man or a woman or something, you know? Yeah.
He must have been in love at some point, you know, who had this whole other life. And that ring, you know, really represents a full life lived outside of this institution. And then I did notice that Ever True to Thee was tattooed on her foot. And she explained that just a few months earlier, her husband, who had run sort of the mechanical side of the excavation, they had been partners for 20 years, both, you know, relationship-wise partners, but also work partners for 20 years. And he had suddenly died just of a heart attack, just kind of dropped dead. It was awful. And he was also the person who found that ring. And he had been, you know, sort of running around telling everybody, he was like, I found it. I found the greatest relic that anyone could find.
Yeah.
And it meant everything to him. And he was so proud of it. And he showed it to everybody. And then when he died, she got that tattoo to remember him.
It was really cool. And you also think hearing something like this, or if they put it in the newspaper or whatever, it's like, would somebody come forward and be like, oh my gosh, that was my great grandmother's ring. You know, I know that, it's got to mean something to somebody.
That's what I'm really hoping, honestly. Like, that is one of the big things that I want to have come out of this, because, you know, God bless the University of Mississippi Medical Center and their research arm that is heading up this whole dig and this whole attempt to sort of tell the story of this asylum. They have gone on publicity tours to like every library in the state. They've held talks. They've done, you know, local news pieces. But I still don't think the story that they're really looking for the family members of these people who were buried there, I don't think the story has actually gotten out that wide. And, you know, a couple of the people we spoke to are descendants of patients, and they don't even live in the state of Mississippi now.
Right.
So they're not gonna hear a talk at, you know, the Greenville, Mississippi Public Library.
Right.
So I think I'm really hopeful that this podcast will actually get that out there and more people can start connecting to, you know, their ancestors.
I love the woman towards the end. I don't know which one of the last couple of episodes was saying that she never had a place where she could say like, oh, my grandmother was there. You know, and she said, and now at least when I drive by, I can say my grandmother was buried there. You know, she never knew much because her mom didn't talk much about it. Just like that was the grandmother. We don't know what happened to her. And I think that for me, you know, knowing both of my grandmothers, one better than the other, for me, I would be really weird to think like, wow, like what happened to my mom's mom, or what happened to my dad's mom or dad? Where are they? You'd want to know. And so I hope that 7,000 people is so many people. There's so many people.
Many people. And, you know, in a lot of cases, there's almost nothing left. Sometimes because of the Yazoo clay, sometimes all that remains of a grave is the outline of like where the bones were, or the outline, like the sort of, you can tell the soil is different from where the sort of the pine box coffin was.
But the clay eats the wood and it eats the person.
Eats the wood and it eats the person. And, you know, like we know that soil over centuries and millennia, you know, can get rid of bones. That's why fossils are so cool when we find them.
Yeah.
But you don't expect it in like 85 years to do that.
Yeah. Wow. Well, maybe that's why Jackson's always under a water boil advisory.
Jackson is always under the boil water advisory.
Because they're like, you guys just get a jug and keep it in your fridge, because I don't know what's going to happen. And maybe if you boil it, it'll be fine.
There's my gosh. A lot I miss about living in Jackson, but boiling my water to wash dishes is not one of those things.
I tell you, so you and I, so what we have in common, really, we have my sister. Okay, let's explain this. I believe your parents live next door to my sister. Is that right?
Yes, I believe that's right.
So if you're looking at my sister's house, they were on the left?
Okay, let's see. My parents, I thought were to the right of your sister.
Okay, my sister, I think, is 4233.
42. Oh, wait. No, my parents are 835. So
Are they on a corner though?
No.
I could be
But
making it up. I could be making that number up, but I think that's
around the corner. But
well, they are neighbors for sure.
And that's the thing about Jackson too, is that if you're in the same neighborhood, you're neighbors, and they probably just referred to each other as neighbors.
They actually could have, their backyards could have touched, actually, now that I'm thinking about it.
I wonder if that's what it was, actually, because my parents shared backyard space with like 3 different.
Yeah. Oh, Lord.
That makes sense.
My sister had those 3 boys. So I felt bad. But now, and your mom is interesting because your mom went to medical school like late in life and became a doctor, right?
She did. Yeah. She went to medical school when she was in her mid 40s is when she started. So, which is really cool. She finished her residency at the age of 51 and then practiced medicine in Jackson for 20 years after that.
That is pretty, that's a great role model for a mom, you know?
It is. It definitely kind of has allowed somebody like me who, you know, also took a solid 15 years to really figure out what my career was. It sort of took some of the pressure off. I was like, well, you know, I can always change my career again. You don't have to be locked into something locked into a certain path at age 23.
Now, how often do you go to Mississippi? Because I know you guys are working on the final bonus episode for this under the Yazoo Clay, but how often do you go, and have you already started a new project? Because this one was I know it takes like a year to get this together. Yeah,
I was actually in Mississippi day before yesterday, reporting on a different show. This one's going to come out in September on Sony's The Binge Network, which is also where you can find Devil in the Ditch, and then my second podcast, Dr. Miracle. Those are both there too. So
that I was subscribed to The Binge because of those podcasts.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, this will be a good one. This one, working title is The Vanishing of Janice Rose, and it's great. It's a missing persons story about a mom of 4 little girls. She's 23 years old, you know, high school homecoming queen, gets married early, and then one day, poof, is just gone. And her sister in particular, who's a big person we talked to, and her friends, they all spend 45 years looking for her. And, you know, without giving too much away, they figure out what happened to her, and it is the absolute last thing anybody expected. So,
and where was this in Mississippi?
This is in South Mississippi. She was living in Columbia. You know Columbia?
Yeah, I do.
It's right north of Louisiana. And so she's living there, and then she was sort of last seen. She had a job working in like Pearl River County area. So it's good. It's got like there's a trip down to Louisiana. We go down there. Some things happen there. It gets really Cajun-y. Lots of fun.
Yeah, it gets real Cajun-y. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, I had completely forgotten about Dr. Miracle till you told me about that, because I listened to that too.
Oh, yeah.
That was crazy.
That was crazy. That was a little less like on brand for me. You know, it was California and not the deep South.
Well, it was about that guru who was telling everybody he could cure their cancer and whatnot.
Yeah, no, he is absolutely one of the worst people I've ever written.
It's still around, right?
He is very much still around. I do think he was just indicted on a new set of charges, which is good.
Yeah.
So he may actually, you know what? No, he had already been indicted when we made the podcast. I think he had to plead guilty to, like, you know, again, the sort of catch-all of practicing medicine without a license, which doesn't really get at what he did, because by practicing medicine without a license, he was sort of, you know, killing people because he was telling them exactly the wrong thing to do to treat or not treat, you know, their terminal cancer or whatever it was that they had. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh God. Okay. Yeah. I listened to those on the binge, but this one under the Yazoo Clay is with iHeart.
It is. Yeah. It's my first iHeart show, and they've been great to work with too.
I was just 2 weekends ago, I was at Podcast Movement in Chicago, and I was at an iHeart party.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I know a ton of people who are at Podcast Movement, actually, and I really wanted to go, and the timing just didn't work out. But how was it? Was it fun?
It's fun. This is the 3rd year I've gone, third or 4th, and we did LA, and then this one was in Chicago. Now the next one they have is in August in Dallas, to which I said no, thank you. August in Dallas, I think I could just go to Mississippi and sweat if I want.
You know, it's really funny. I was in Dallas on Sunday, actually, for this next show that's coming out. And it was 43 degrees in April. And I didn't check the weather ahead of time. I was like, sure, I'll bring like a sweater. No,
Yeah.
It was so cold. It was like New York cold there.
Weird.
It was very strange. And I was I was more than a little cranky about it. I was very cranky about it.
I was telling you, I'm going to Oxford this weekend. And my husband was like, have you checked the weather? I was like, no, I'm sure we'll be in short. I'm sure I'll be dying. And he goes, no, it's actually going to be like 40 at night and 60 in the day. I was like, perfect. It was like, I love a 60 during the day is the best. You can walk around. You can shop.
I'm ready for 85-degree weather. I am so ready for it. But I say this, it's now like, it's 42 degrees right now in New York. So I'm just.
So you go back and forth, New York to the Mississippi area a lot.
Often as I can. And my parents actually, they did the unthinkable and they moved to Connecticut about 6 months ago. What? I know. Isn't that
Connecticut?
Crazy? I know, my poor dad has never really lived anywhere but Mississippi, outside of his, when my mom was in med school and when he was in college. The rest of his life has been spent in Mississippi.
Why Connecticut though, Larrison?
Well, one of my sisters lives in the town that they moved to. The other one lives about 40 minutes away from there. And then I'm about an hour and a half away. So.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
Yeah, they wanted to be close to us.
Yeah.
I got to be honest with you. I think they miss the social vibe of Jackson. You know, Jackson's a fun town. Great people, good dinner parties, good storytellers, just all in all, a great sort of laid back vibe. And I think they're getting it with the New Canaan, Connecticut crew. I don't want to say anything. I think they're just finding their feet.
I think as older people moving,
people they've met. I want to clarify that.
No. I think moving at any age, but especially if you're kind of older and established, and then you've got to move into a new group, and those people are older and established and have probably been friends like people in Jackson for 100 years, and now they've got new people coming in.
Totally. Yeah. Oh, and I think that is you're breaking into a whole new social circle, and their friends in Jackson were so cute. I really love their friends in Jackson. So.
They're probably like, we're going to come up north and see y'all.
Oh,
I can't even believe it.
If Ivy and Frank Alley are listening to this podcast, please come visit me.
Do you, how did you feel about Parker Posey, our Mississippi girl, and how great she did on White Lotus with that amazing accent?
I loved it. Okay, I will say though, and I am probably just betraying how little time I've spent in Laurel, Mississippi, but B, how long I've now been back up in New York. At first I was like, what is that? What, Parker, what is that accent you're doing? And then I went and watched some videos of people from Laurel, and it turns out she was absolutely spot on. And so now I retreated. But I did think from the moment I watched it, I mean, I saw a tweet that someone put out and they said, can we get the people at the Academy to please nominate Carrie Coon for Best Actress in a Dramatic Series and Parker Posey for Best Actress in a Comedy?
That is right.
Yes.
That nails it.
She is every scene she did. And it's funny too, because I think of Parker Posey as so iconic and like in and of herself. Mm-hmm. But I forgot that that's who it was. Like the character was so believable and so like so many moms I have known throughout the years that I just completely fell in with her character.
It was so great. I will say this is very random, but right before I got on here, I got an email that was, from HBO Max. And this is like on my personal account, not, sometimes I get like screeners, whatever on the podcast one. This was to my personal account, was like, did you enjoy White Lotus? Would you like to take a survey? I was like, well, yes, I would. Because I love a survey. And I get these ones from NBC sometimes. So I don't know if that's a list I was on. So I took a survey about White Lotus, and it was like, did you watch season 1, 2, 3? Which one did you like best? And it's all about, now talking about season 3, and it's all about, and every answer I was like, Parker Posey. Every answer I was like, the characters were so good. Like, bring her back. And I think, Mike White had told the cast to look at Southern Charm
That's right.
to get a lot of those North Carolina accents. So when people were saying Parker Posey wasn't so North Carolina, I was like, well, she didn't say she was from North Carolina. She said she lived in Raleigh, but in my mind, she's from Mississippi and moved to Raleigh because she went to UNC or Duke or whatever. And that UNC Duke thing is so real just from living up here.
That.
Yeah, I loved it. I was like, it's so...
It was like the two things were like kind of fighting for the soul of that kid. It was like, is he going to have a UNC soul or is he going to have a Duke soul? Like, which one?
It was so good. But I just, there's so many catchphrases from her. I mean, the one that, speaks to me the most is, look, now I have to drink myself to sleep. I was like, it's so good. It's like, don't judge me. I'm your mother. I sent that to my kids. So many times in the last month. Don't judge me. I'm your mother.
I'm your mother. My partner and I now just anytime something surprising happens, it's Piper. No.
Tsunami. I loved it so much. So, I mean, she and I are the same age and in the same, graduating high school class. And her twin brother, Chris Posey, used to date my friend Gigi for years. And my friend Tom Paulson is very good friends with her. And so he goes, I could just shoot her a note and see if she'll do your podcast. I said,
she should absolutely come on this show, but she has to do the whole thing in a Southern accent.
I said, oh, Tom, I said, that's not how it works. Like, you can't just text Parker Posey and ask her to come on my podcast. He goes, well, sure I could. I was like, well, you could, but they're going to send me to her agent, her PR person, the HBO Max, whatever. So now that the show is completely over, I'm going to wait a week or two. And then I'm going to be like, maybe now that I wouldn't have to go through like HBO channels, maybe just her personally and like whoever's her booker, maybe I could do it.
I get the sense I get from Parker Posey is that Parker Posey does what she wants to do. Mm-hmm. And everyone else sort of just has to fall in line behind it. And I think that's probably true for her press people. So yeah, I like your plan.
I like it too. I mean, if I tell you that Dazed and Confused is a movie that changed my life and, she's in it as that mean high school girl, so good.
Yeah.
So good.
Fry freshmen, bitches. Fry. Yes.
Yeah. It has them lay on the ground and fry like bacon. Oh my God. I was like, thank God we didn't have that at Jackson Prep.
I'm disappointed Jackson Prep didn't have that. I feel like, at the Washington School in Greenville, we all assumed that Jackson Prep was very much like that.
No. Or maybe I just wasn't cool enough to be bullied. I don't know. That's, you know what? I think I just answered my own question. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm excited about this other project that you're working on because I love a good true crime murder mystery.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited about this one too. It's more sort of tonally in line with Devil in the Ditch. It's just a different kind of Mississippi community and but it's very much a family drama. And I love a family drama.
Me too.
It gets me back to my soap opera roots. So
speaking of family drama, since Devil in the Ditch came out and many people, and you and I talked about this when I talked to you about it. And then we talked about it with my own family murder that happened, way when my dad was little, but that's on the Patreon, guys, if you want to hear it. But your cousin was featured very heavily in that with lots of people having suspicion on him for the murder of your grandmother. And your cousin, right?
Yeah, cousin, my dad's first cousin.
Yeah, your dad's first cousin. So I just want to make sure I was like, because it wasn't an uncle, it was a cousin.
No, but I mean, like generationally uncle.
Yeah. And you talked to him at the end of it as sort of like a bonus, and you sat outside because he didn't want you to come in the house because he had a little bit of a hoarding issue. Mm-hmm. And he kind of explained to you what it had been like all those years, like to be a suspect. He would say like, I'm not going to talk about it anymore, but then he would keep talking about it,
Yeah.
And do you think people around Greenville still think he did it?
I know they do. They send me DMs all the time. Like it is every 3 months I get one from somebody in Greenville being like, you know what I just heard he did? And, come on, Larrison, why didn't you just come out and say he did it? And I'm like, well, I didn't have the actual evidence to do that. But
yeah, you can't say that.
The town of Greenville has solved the case in the town of Greenville's mind. Okay. And, whether they're right or wrong, I guess given the information we have, we might never know. But.
We'll never know unless somebody confesses. I mean,
Yeah.
It's terrible.
I know. Well, that's another thing. I actually got a DM about this very recently. Someone was like, do you think he's going to confess on his deathbed? And I was like, I do not think that he's going to confess on his deathbed.
No.
I don't see that happening. I think if he did do it, and jury is still out, but I think if he did do it, he has convinced himself he didn't.
Right.
I think we can get ourselves to believe just about anything that we want. And I think there's a lot of motivation for him to convince himself that something different happened. And he lives in a pretend land anyway,
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't live in the same world that you and I live in.
Does he have like friends? He still goes to church. Does anybody like see him besides like at the grocery store?
He still goes to church. He has a couple of friends. I think it's more people who sort of look after him than actual, friends the way we think of it. But he does still have, he still has some people who look after him.
And how old is he now?
He is 74.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And I have called him a couple of times to check in. He'll send me text messages at like 2 a.m. sometimes, usually having to do with the Libertarian Party in Greenville.
I'm sure that's live and kicking in Greenville, the Libertarian Party. I'm sure that's, yeah.
He's the head of it, if it sort of tells you anything about the groundswell of support that they have. But
Okay.
So like I'll hear from him occasionally. And, I feel like I don't like the idea that anybody is sort of marooned socially. So, he was kind enough to be honest with me for this project. And so I feel like I should be kind enough to, check in on him.
Yeah, I think so. I think you handled it perfectly. And I think that, a lot of people just think he did it and there's no other choice. And again, once he is no longer with us, you guys may go through that house and find something. If you could get an excavator in there, I don't know.
The thought of going through that house is terrifying, but
also fascinating.
I know, truly fascinating.
Okay, well, tell everybody where they can follow you and find out more about, of course, Devil in the Ditch, Dr. Miracle, and the new one, Under the Yazoo Clay, and then, of course, the new one that's going to come in September. I'm excited.
Yes, please go ahead and subscribe to The Binge for The Vanishing of Janice Rose. And yes, you can find Under Yazoo Clay, wherever you get your podcast. It's Apple, Spotify, iHeart. And you can follow me on all the socials at This Is Larrison.
Larrison. You guys, if you ever wonder about an interesting Southern name, Larrison Campbell's a good one.
Thank you.
It's a good one. I had a conversation yesterday with a podcaster, Molly McAleer, and she's from Boston and she lives in LA. And she said at the end, we were talking, she goes, I just, I understand like it's Mary Payne, but we weren't recording. And she says, but I'm just so interested. Why? Because it really sounds like a roller derby name or like a drag name that like I made up. And it's like an entendre with the P-A-Y-N-E. She's like, I'm dying to know about it. I was like, oh, God, I wish it was that fun.
I really wish now that you did roller derby, because that is a great roller derby name. It really is.
I'm not tough enough for even roller skates. I can't handle anybody knocking me over. Are you kidding? But no, it was like, and I said, let me just break it down for you. In the South, a lot of people will take a maiden name or a middle name of my dad. And then that's where it comes from. My grandfather, George Pangosser. They had a bunch of boys all down the road, George Pangosser. My dad, had his third kid. I assume he thought it would be his last and was like, well, I guess I'm not going to have a boy. So I got to throw in Payne and that's how I got it. And I didn't like it and I didn't like it then and I don't like it now. And I have to explain it every day of my life, but it's my name. And she's like fascinating. I mean, she was fascinated. So I'm trying to find the audio. My sisters and my mom and I did, we were coming back from the beach and in the car, we just recorded all the double Southern names that we could think of. And I put it on my Patreon as terrible audio. We're in the car, but I mean, it's like 30 minutes of us just throwing out double names for people to understand,
Yeah, I've actually got some really good ones if I can add them onto the pile. My best friend growing up, Mary Winston.
Yep.
Another really good friend, Ellen Douglas. And and then my cousin was Ann Dyer, which I think all like really great, all follow the same pattern of women's name first, family name second.
Yeah. I said a lot of it is Anne something, Mary something. And I was like, we know Anne McCaslin, we know. And she's like, what? I mean, she just could not. But she was like, I'm always so interested to learn these like regional things. And I was like,
And
yeah.
And a lot of people they'll do a satire of a Southern sorority girl, and it'll be like Mary Claire or like Mary, Mary Susan.
I'm
And you're
like,
like,
that's
no,
not
no,
it.
no, 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 that's not the real South. The real South, you got to have the family name second.
Yeah, you got to have that weird middle name that people think is your last name and just call you Mary, even if you explain it and they still call you Mary. And then you go, you know what, we're probably
haunted by it.
Yeah. I mean, I think Mary Larrison or Ann Larrison would be a great name.
Yeah, well, Larrison, as these things go, Larrison is my middle name. So
yeah. And what's your first name?
I have my first name is Aline. So it's Aline Larrison Campbell. I was named for my grandmother, whose first name was Aline and last name was Larrison. So,
yes. Well, that's my sister is named Finney.
The same pattern, yeah.
My grandmother's name was Elizabeth Finney. So my sister's name is Finney Elizabeth,
Yeah.
And then my sister Tay is named after my mom's maiden name, which was Taylor. So she's Tay.
That's cute. I like Tay as a nickname for Taylor.
It's so funny because, Taylor is such a popular name now. And it doesn't occur to me at all that Tay's name is Taylor ever. Even though legally it's not anymore. She legally changed it to Tay Kosser Morgan, but instead of Margaret Taylor Kosser. I mean, and anybody says Tay and then they say that Tay for like a nickname for Taylor, it doesn't even like put together to me that that's my sister's name.
That's so funny. Yeah, I love the style. I love naming people after people in, the family and stuff like that.
I tell my friends, when they were all, having babies, and a lot of them had babies way before me, I was always like, just think about it. Just think about the name if you think they're ever going to move. I'm here to tell you.
Yeah.
It's rough.
Yeah, it's rough. Double name. I know. And actually, one of my friends recently had a kid and she was like, I really want to call her by her middle name. And I was like, please don't. Do not do it. Like, I know you don't think it sounds as pretty when you read it all out, but it will make her life easier if she doesn't have to have a separate name at the doctor's office.
Yes. And a lot of times now on forms, it'll say like, for you, it would say like Aileen Larrison Campbell, and then it would say nickname.
Yeah.
And then you could put Larrison as your nickname.
They don't look at that. They don't care. They just see the first one and they're just like, Aline, which is
you're like,
and then I don't hear them when they call me in the waiting room.
I had yesterday in the waiting room at the doctor's office, I heard Mary, and this lady hopped up and walked in. They said, are you Mary Gilbert? She goes, oh, no. And she walked back and I go, I guess I'm Mary Gilbert. Here I am. It's not my name.
Let me explain double names to you now on the way.
I don't care. I'm the doctor's office. I'll come and see you. It's one of those once a year doctors. I was like, I don't care.
That's fine. Yeah.
But I have been coming here for 24 years and you still don't have it right, but that's okay. It's okay. I did give birth to both my children here, but it's fine. Everybody follow Larrison Campbell. She is a wonderful podcaster. She is a real life journalist, and she's serious business, you guys, but funny at the same time too.
Thank you. It is always so much fun coming on your show. So
this is a bonus episode. People love when I talk to podcasters back from my Pain in the Pod day. So I love when I have a podcaster that I know. I'm like, let's come on, let's talk podcasting. I love it. Okay, don't hang up. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Ads not read by me, Mary Payne, don't necessarily reflect the views of Pink Shade. If you'd like to listen to ad-free, you're going to go on over to Supercast or Patreon, and you can find the links to Pink Shade Prime at pinkshadepodcast.com.